Hey, what's up, y'all? Mack Garrison here with Dash Studio. And boy, do I have a good one for you today. I'm hanging out with the talented Reese Parker doing an interview for our Dash Bash speaker series. Reese is incredibly talented, also a nice guy. But Reese is a creative person making art for cool people and businesses, directing, illustrating, animating. He's uneducated, lacks any in-house experience, and works way too much and has been writing solo for the last 9 or so years, guessing his way through it and loving every minute of it. I'm just reading that off Reese's bio, but Reese, welcome to the podcast, the video cast. You got to explain yourself a little bit on that introduction and like why those were the choice of words to start us off.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mac. I'm excited to chat and just be involved, honestly. I think, I know. The intro, it's like, I'm a very let my work do the talking kind of a guy, I think. So when it comes down to making a bio, it just felt very real. And I guess that's what I prefer over maybe trying to make myself sound cooler than I am. If I want to look cool, go watch my work. And some people think that makes me look cooler.
Dude, it is very cool work. And I also just love the authenticity. I think it speaks a lot to your personality. I've been lucky enough to know you now over the last like 9 or 10 years that I've been running the studio. But yeah, there's a lot of folks who are listening, and this might be their first time finding out who the heck Reece Parker is. So maybe you could just kind of take us back to like some of the early days, like how did you get into animation? What is it? What part of animation really excites you, and what's some of the work you're doing today?
Yeah, good question. Growing up, I was always drawing. I feel like I've said this story too many times. I'll abbreviate, but like a classic kind of creative story. I didn't like math. I liked drawing. So there were times like in school, I would maybe fail the math test, but flip it over and draw a portrait of my teacher and they would hang it up on the wall. Like literally that did happen. And I think that that's just like, it represents kind of my journey growing up. But animation, like, we would have sticky notes in class in like second grade, and we were doing flip books, and I was really into the YouTube stick figure fighting kind of era.
Sick.
I don't know if you remember that.
Of course.
Yeah, that was big. So I had Flash and like just kind of dorked around on it when I had time growing up. Among other creative things, I painted grip tape. That's like the stuff you put on top of skateboards.
Oh, yeah, nice.
I would sell that. I did paintings and graphite portraiture and just all types of creative stuff. And then I was really good at it, but I was also like suburban home, not in like a creative city per se.
Sure.
Very like.
Where are you from originally, Reece? Where'd you grow up?
Just outside of Seattle, a little suburban town called Maple Valley. Yeah, 30 minutes away.
Excellent. Shout out to Maple Valley listeners.
Maple Valley. So I didn't have my eyes on like the future of like, where is the creative work? I was mostly like, I do it because I love it and I probably won't get to do it as I become an adult. And then I just found my way to like being intro to motion graphics. Like I saw like a commercial for Coca-Cola or something that I think Seth Eckert did, who runs the Furrow.
Oh, yeah.
So there was morphs, and it was like, I was like, whoa, this
You're
is
like,
cool.
whoa, what the hell is this?
Yes.
Like, what is this?
Exactly. I was like, I want to do that, whatever that is. And so I learned like exactly that. And I didn't know motion graphics was wider than just that. I was like, that was what I want to do. So I learned After Effects and I learned shapes and I learned kind of those things. And I also brought my, years of sketching and drawing and illustrating into kind of that. And then over the years, it sort of shaped my voice, I think, in motion.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, like, honestly, I think with our industry, I heard this term from this like graphic designer back in the day. His name was like Edward Tufte. And he talks about this like capital T theory, which I really like. It's like, we start in this one point and there's like interest. So for you, it could have been illustration. Like I love doodling, I love drawing. Then you hit this T, like the capital T part of it. And it's like, ooh, maybe I can put this in motion. So then you're starting to play around with motion. Or, ooh, maybe I can direct motion. You're directing. And so basically you have all these T's to make you unique. And I think motion design in our industry is probably the best collection of all these capital T's out there with these different backgrounds, different experiences. When did you know that like this isn't just a fun hobby, people will pay me for it? Did you have like a first job? Did you like kind of seek it out a little bit?
Well, I mean, again, the time where I ran into motion design, I was at sort of a critical point in my personal life. I was skateboarding a lot. I was graduated from high school. I was not in college or on a path to sort of buff the resume in any way at all. So I was like, once I recognized that, oh, Coke hires artists to do work like this, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do that. And so I worked for like overtime for a year, like kind of 16-hour days, just nonstop, just teaching myself out of really like desperation. Because again, I'm coming at it like I clean bathrooms at Taco Bell and ride a skateboard. Like this isn't my world. I don't understand this world. So if I can teach myself how to do it and be that good, maybe I can get hired. And so at a certain point, I had like personal works and like a little portfolio built of no client work whatsoever. And I'm just cold emailing like jobs off of job boards, not even Motionographer. I don't even know that exists yet. It's like Indeed and like other general job boards. Like I could do the work, I could do it. And then finally, like somebody hired me freelance for like $20 an hour.
Sick.
I didn't know what a day rate was. I didn't know how to charge. I knew nothing.
Didn't know the
Uh,
process, didn't
yeah,
know anything. You were like, they just need an animation. I got to make this
yes,
sucker for them.
yes. And they literally held my hand through it. I think because I was so cheap, they like taught me kind of how to
Wow.
do some of it. It was really
Was it a studio? Was it a company, an individual?
a
Like what?
small little agency in New York. I forget the name of it now, but I
That's so
hadn't
funny.
kept up
So
with them.
so
Yeah,
basically at the time, you're working at Taco Bell more or less as a janitor, doing animation stuff on the side, and you're like, I've got to basically bust my ass on this because I don't have any education on it. It's all self-taught. And so if I'm going to win the opportunity, it's got to be through hustle, essentially.
absolutely. Yep. Just showing up,
Wow.
doing the work, learning. And I was so excited and like in love with it that it's a lot of work, but it just felt like necessary, like absolutely, yeah, just driven.
There's a whole generation of kids who could be listening to this video cast, and they're like, cool, I'm not going to school. Thanks, Reese. You just ruined all these parents' hopes and dreams.
Yeah,
No, no.
do what makes sense for you, you know.
Course. I mean, I think that is a really interesting conversation point, though, with so many different fields out there that do require a certain degree of higher education. I think motion design has been one of the most amenable and like welcoming kind of everybody. So you get this first kind of gig with this small agency. You had kind of crafted a smaller portfolio website of just some personal explorations. Did you find that that first gig like really almost opened a door? It was like as soon as like almost you had a client project kind of grounded in it that kind of build off of itself?
Yeah, I mean, eventually it did. It was a bumpy early road. For your knowledge, I didn't want to just jump in freelance. I did that
Sure.
because I had to. I asked for internships and like staff jobs and just couldn't land anywhere because I was so like raw talent, but no knowledge. And that was a barrier that was not allowing me to pass. Like I was getting interviews in Seattle for like weird like leadership role. Like my skill set was beyond my knowledge, meaning
Mm.
people saw my work and put me here and then expected me to be here. And so I would come in for interviews and be like an intern. And so it was like I couldn't land anywhere because they didn't know
You
how to use me.
had this raw
Yes.
talent that was
Yes.
like exceptional, but you had no of the supplemental information to go along with
Exactly.
that. So people are like, how
Exactly.
is this guy this good, but has no idea about process or organization?
Exactly. And I only know that in retrospect with the information I have now, but I didn't get it at the time. I was like, just like, yeah, I could do the work. And anyway, I couldn't get a job anywhere. So I had to be freelance. And then eventually, like one odd job led to another odd job, like 6 months later, led to another one. And there was huge gaps in between. And then I got an email from Buck, like my first year in, like down the line. And that changed everything. Once I went to go work with them in LA. They flew me out. I was in studio for a few weeks. I was like booked ever since.
That's
Yeah,
crazy. It's like
yeah,
it's like the like an actor who gets like the first big gig, right? It's like, oh
yes,
my God, this is it. Don't mess this up, Reese. You gotta
yeah,
stay focused.
yeah.
I
That's
love that.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I was coming along, I think a lot of people experience that. That's really relatable in the sense that no one ever truly knows all the right process stuff. I mean, I remember my first gig I had at an agency. I remember this guy over in the corner basically yelling like, who the hell is Mack Garrison? And what is wrong with this project file? And I had to like sheepishly raise my hand
Yeah.
and admit that I had like comp one, comp two, comp three, layer one, layer two. It was atrocious.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
was really nice about this, Reese, is that he took time and went through and basically showed me the way that stuff should be organized. And I'm forever grateful of it. Like, I know he was upset at the time, but he took
Totally.
space and taught me. So a question for
Totally.
you is, during this kind of transition era, if you will, of like creative, finding your way, figuring out the structure behind it, did you have any mentors or did you find and reach out to people to try to get some of that knowledge?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people were, as I began to get more hired and become more hireable, again, I was mostly raw, intuitive talent. And like my knowledge was years of putting things together over time. And like all of my clients were almost mentors at that time. I would
Mm.
have creative directors reach out to me, be like, I'll bring you on. And I'd be like, great. And then I'd ask them like endless questions, or I'd reach out. Like I reached out to Alan Lassiter, one of my first years in the industry, like, I love your work and I love your position. And how do you blah, blah, blah. And he was really, really sweet and responded. And I'm sure he wouldn't remember that if you told him, but he would like had a long list answering all my questions. And I probably did that 100 times, to be honest with you.
Man, I love that so much because I feel like, for whatever reason, we none of us want to look like idiots. I think that's what it is, right? You're young. You don't want to reach out to someone. You don't want to bother them, or you don't want to
Totally.
feel like your stuff isn't good enough to even be having that conversation. For
Yeah.
anyone that's listening to this that might be on the precipice of graduation, whether it's from school or like a school of motion course or something along those lines, what advice would you give in how to reach out to some of these folks or how to put yourself out there or the confidence to do that like you did?
Good question. I mean, I think looking back at how I did it, I was mostly naive, but I was also really genuine. And I think you could feel that in my approach. I wasn't acting out of any sense of like, you owe me a response. I mostly was like, you probably won't read this. And if that's the case, that's okay. On the off chance you do read it, like, I love your stuff and that's why I'm reaching out. And I think that energy you can feel and it's encouraging a response. And I have a lot of students reach out to me on the flip side now where I try my best to sort of honor my early days and be really sort of spend some time answering thoughtfully to them in the same way that I maybe would have hoped earlier. But also like you can't expect it to go that way. You sort of have to like, I hope, but if it doesn't, it's okay. And I'm going to try again. That's just how, like, that energy is necessary. And failure isn't failure. It's like you keep moving and pushing, and eventually it'll land.
Dude, I love that so much. I had this
Yeah.
phrase a couple of years ago that like I just gravitated towards that's perfection inhibits progress. I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
so much as creatives and designers, we hold stuff in such high regard. It's like I don't want to put anything out there until I really like it. But you think
Yeah.
about all the times that slows you up. You're the student trying to perfect your portfolio. It's not quite there yet. I don't want to reach out. We're the studio trying to update our portfolio. Oh, it doesn't quite
Yeah.
have all the projects, the reels. At the end of the day, and I think you would echo the same sentiment, people will
Yeah.
critique whatever you put out there. You always have 2020 vision and doing something a little bit differently, but you just got to keep the bus moving forward, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I ran into that problem more recently than ever before, honestly, where it's like, almost inhibiting productivity because I want to over organize or over
Mm.
calculate or over speculate or analyze. And it just, yeah, at a certain point, it's too far and you're actually getting in the way of doing the work. So I'm kind of trying to remind my brain to go back to kind of the early days of like, yes, I want to make great work, but I also just want to be productive and make it simple, you know?
Of course, simplicity rules each and every day. Even
Yes.
with your design and your compositions, I feel like every
Yeah.
solution usually revolves about me taking stuff away versus like adding
Yeah,
anything
totally.
new.
Totally. Totally.
I think something that's been interesting, especially over the last couple of years, AI is such a hard conversation to have in our industry right now. I think just by the fact that like there's more people than ever in the space. Marketing companies are turning towards, or excuse me, companies are turning to investing in AI, which is taken away from marketing budgets. So everyone's kind of working a bit leaner. I think that's from studios, that's from
Yeah.
freelancers. So for someone getting in the space, you had this hustle and this tenacity that I think really led you to these opportunities, got you into the door, and ultimately led to where you are now. Did you feel like looking back on that? that there was maybe one single piece of advice or something that seemed to work best when you're trying to get yourself out there? Is it the cold emails? Is it like conferences? Looking back on it, was there one thing like, oh, if I could do this over again, knowing what I know now, I would do X, Y, and Z?
Mm-hmm. It's hard because so much has changed, even in a short time, 9 years. The landscape is different now. But what I would say through those changes, what remains is uh, you gotta love the work, and putting that love into the work is going to attract clientele, and that's true for any service. So, like, I spent a year rebuilding my site with a developer and just putting so much love into it, kind of for no reason, to be honest with you, other than I really wanted it to be great. And now I'm doing sites for clients that are paying me real budgets.
Whoa, that's wild.
And
That's cool.
I didn't do anything other than say on Instagram, I'm redoing my site. I here, go check it out. And it's like, that's all I did. Now I have a platform at this stage in my career, but the energy and the through line is the same. Love the work that will attract the clients. It's like, I don't have any formula other than that, to be honest.
Well, honestly, it's just authentic. I love that, right? It shows if you care about something, you're putting time and attention towards it. It's
Yeah.
reflected in the final
Yes.
outcome. From a studio owner perspective, I have a interesting question for you. You made me think of, there was this long standing, I don't know if it was like a thought or long standing conviction. I think there's a good word, that if you are really good at something, niche down almost, like get really good at this thing, and that's what everyone's going to come to you for.
Yeah.
With all this change, you accepted, it sounds like, some of these website jobs. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of what I do adjacent to it. You kind of
Yeah.
opened it up. Do you feel like that's a change that you're starting to recognize? And as you look ahead to like future Reese, are you kind of open to saying yes to a bit more? And should other people kind of be considering that as well?
This is a hard conversation because you're going to land, it's 50-50 whoever you talk to.
Sure, sure.
I do not subscribe to niching down. However, I also don't subscribe to saying yes to everything. The reason I felt it was appropriate to take some of these jobs that are outside of my normal skill set or service that I usually provide for clients is because they said, we want it done in a Reese way. We want your
Uh,
voice on it. So it wasn't me acting as some ex graphic designer. It was Reese being Reese, just for a different service. And honestly, as we move through changes in this industry, we start to question what it is that is going to remain valuable for clients. And that's a hard answer. And I'm not willing to turn away projects because they're not an animated film that are like super artistic like that might be valuable right now for clients, and that's okay. I can still kind of be Reese on something else. So it's been really rewarding. And yes, I've had to my mind a bit, and it's hard to go like, shit, some artists do niche and they're great, but like, I don't know. I don't know. It's a
what a
hard question.
compliment, though. I mean, like that's a premier place to be, where it's like, look, I want your problem solving ability is essentially what they're
Yes.
asking for. And
Yeah.
honestly, this is one of the biggest things that I believe motion designers should be advocating for themselves and highlighting about themselves, is just how good of problem solvers we are. I mean,
Yeah.
by
You're
definition,
right.
we're multidisciplinary creatives who are trying to
You're
come up
right.
with analogies and metaphors for all these different things. So we're naturally good at thinking on our toes and moving quick given the deadlines. And it's why I personally believe that no matter how much change happens over the next 10 and 20 years, is motion designers are always going to be employable, because the sheer fact that like we can navigate ambiguity, we can come up with solutions and move things forward. And so I
Yeah.
think like that's good advice for anyone to adhere to who's in the space, is like, okay, if the technology is changing and maybe the medium's changing, where can there be flexibility and how to kind of present myself in a problem solving way? So I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's change it up a little bit. One of the things I'm really curious about. You've been in this space now. What is it? 9 years? Is that what you said professionally?
Yeah. I think this is the ninth year, maybe.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, isn't that crazy? Doesn't it both
Yeah.
feel like the other day and like you've been doing this forever? It's like both like I've been here forever and I just started.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, I
Yeah.
bet dollars to donuts that you've had some wild creative stories over the years, from like a crazy client project to something kind of unique. Is there a story that maybe you haven't shared? And we don't have to like call anyone out. We can blind it over. But I just want to know a crazy industry story that we could share, Reese.
Yeah, I mean, there's been wild stuff, a lot of wild stuff, honestly. Maybe one of the more interesting ones was a high profile. Actually, this has happened multiple times, so maybe it's not even weird. But it's the case of like high profile clients. You have a specific team within that client that you're working directly with. And then at a certain stage in production, whatever deliverable you are delivering gets to the eyes of somebody above the ladder or
The
up the
classic
chain
stakeholder.
and like shifts everything. Like they don't seem to care at all about the progress thus far and just makes a snap decision. And I've had that result in canceling $500,000 projects. I've had that result in redoing six-figure projects entirely because one color was wrong. I mean, I've had like multiple wild things where it's just, if this person had their eyes slightly sooner, maybe it could have saved like hundreds of thousands of dollars. But for whatever
So
reason,
crazy.
it just doesn't unfold that way. I don't know. Yeah. So I guess that counts. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Someone spending that amount of money and then changing
Yeah.
everything at the last minute is
Yeah.
absurd. And you're right, though. I mean, we've navigated stuff like that before. Or the one that always is so surprising to me is the one where the client spends time, energy, and effort. You finish the project and it just never goes live. Like we've had a couple of
Yeah.
projects we've worked on, they've just like eaten it. It's just never gone out.
Yep.
And I'm just like, how in the world could you invest so much time and energy and never
Yep.
put something out in the world? It's kind of bonkers.
I had that too. Yeah. Same. I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, here, tell me this. I always am looking for new inspiration or finding out how folks think and how they tick. A lot of folks look up to you, Reese, for your inspiration. I mean, you do some amazing work. I got your website pulled up here. It looks phenomenal. So I don't know, maybe I need to get
Thank
you
you.
to design our website. I might hire you for that too.
Let's do it.
But I'm curious, over the course of the last, decade, basically, who have been some of the creatives that inspired you? I know you mentioned Alan Lasseter and reaching out to him. Who are some
Absolutely.
others that you're just like, oh, I love this studio's work or I love this person's work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them come from sort of what I'm calling the golden age of motion design. But I think what it really was like the little bubble within motion that was sort of the Buck Giant Ant Gunner era. Like my goal was to be as good as them as one artist. And that's a silly goal because it's subjective and whatever and impossible. But I really looked up to a lot of those guys and still do, the ones that are kind of still doing work. And I know a lot of it's shifted and pivoted, and that's just the way of the world. But I look back on that era where, every day there was a new piece that like literally blew my mind and taught me something or inspired me to kind of try something new. Um, that's really valuable. And I think it's different now. My inspirations now would come from like creators on social or designers that are doing logos. It's like, I think I've expanded my mind a bit because I feel like at this point it's necessary, and maybe that comes back in later years. I don't know.
It reminds me of the wine after coffee days, right? The
Yep.
Vimeo channel where you go there and there was always something new, some new inspiration, and that's where
Yes.
I would like collect my Vimeo likes. But I think you're
Yes.
right. I think there's something to be said about finding inspiration outside those traditional channels. So of course
Yep.
you have the Vimeos and the YouTube, and now you have Instagram and
Yep.
TikTok. Well, TikTok for a little bit. I think by the time this might be published, TikTok might be gone. But
Yeah. Yeah.
what are some of the other spots you look towards to inspiration?
Good question. Film. I just saw Nosferatu by Robert Eggers, and it was like unbelievably like rich. Every shot was like a painting, and it's just like, maybe I write a movie. No, I won't. But I'm just saying, like, wow, I pulled stuff from music and film and art and video games and life. And I'm trying to widen my horizons a bit these days, whereas before I think I was more singularly focused in an era that was really feeding me. But now it's less so, and so you have to kind of go, where's the future and where do I want to? I told my wife, like, I think 2025 is going to be like a 2016 year for Reese, which is just like very self-focused, doing a lot of different work, experimenting a lot, really productive, because I think that's going to be fruitful for the years to come. Instead of like abundant opportunity, like kind of chilling, signing checks, like there were those years too, and those were great. But we got to adapt when we need to adapt. And it just feels like, it's that time to really kind of explore.
Dude, I love that. The reinvestment in creative, it's like almost in a way you've kind of set yourself on this path. You've been doing the path and you haven't given yourself enough time to analyze, damn, am I walking in the right direction?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like, should I be dabbling in something else? I know I think it was on Instagram maybe earlier last year about this tattoo apprenticeship where you're basically getting into tattooing. Is some of this
Yeah.
kind of lending itself to kind of that exploration? Is that what kind of brought you into like trying out tattooing?
Absolutely. So I was getting tattooed often, and my artist was like, I might leave the shop and go somewhere else, but if I had an apprentice, maybe I'd stick around. And I was like, I'll do it, man. That sounds really interesting. Like, I know how to draw. Technically, you can give me a pencil and I can do kind of almost anything with it. So I think that might transition. And he was like, yeah. And we're like really good friends. So it was a really sweet, like, acceptance into an entirely different industry. And they afforded me a lot of respect based on sort of my accomplishments in the digital space. And so it was a really seamless and easy. It did not feel like starting over. It felt like, dude, come in here. We'll show you these ways. And when you need to use it, use it. So like for me, it's like 5 years from now, I don't know what's going on. I just cannot predict it. And if I need to fall back and like really hone in on tattooing, I absolutely can.
That's so
Mm.
wild. What do you feel like, to your point, if you have a pencil, you can kind of draw something, you can draw whatever, you can translate it over. Have there been more surprises than you realized on the relationship from like motion design into tattooing? Was there anything you're like, oh, I didn't expect this to have this similar kind of approach, but that's cool that it does?
That's a really interesting question. Some of the technical aspects maybe transition in a way that or parallel in a way that maybe wouldn't be expected. I mean, obviously learning digital softwares could be compared to like learning new languages. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of interesting like little tweaks and whatever. And I think the tattooing version of that is the machines and which machine and which needle and which type of ink and why and what is it doing and how is it moving. And, there's similar, but it's also very like it's draftsman like. You're sketching a lot. There's a medical aspect that was the most difficult for me, by the way,
Sure.
because all of the art, I go like, yeah, I'm art boy. But when you're like, well, this is almost surgery, so be very careful. I'm like, oh, that's a new world entirely. So I'm,
100%.
exactly. It's, yeah, connecting what does connect, but also like being very reverent about the parts that are completely new and need respect.
I love that. It's being confident but not cocky, right? It's like,
Yeah.
being confident in your skill set. You're like, I can translate this over, but being humble to the new space you're in and making sure you're continuing to learn. I think all of us could
Yeah.
take that advice with everything we do is like, be
Yeah.
confident, speak our mind, say what we believe in, but also understand that we're still learning, we're still growing as well too. We don't
Totally.
know everything. All right, I'm gonna put you on the spot with this question. Do you think we could get a live Reese Parker tattoo session at the Dash Bash? You want to tattoo something on somebody on stage?
I would love to if we can figure out how to make it like above ground and not against the law. So there's like permitting and things that would have to take place before I'd be allowed to do so. But yeah, other than that, I would love to do it. And there are some people that are excited to maybe partake in that if we can kind of get it to work.
I love it. I love it. You heard it here. So if we can get it above grade, above par, we run a tight
yeah.
ship here. We'll do it legally. We'll
That's
get
right.
Reese tattooing, folks. Well, Reese, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I know a lot of folks are really excited to be hanging at the bash with you. Have you given much thought on kind of what you want to hone in on or any teasers you have for folks who might be attending?
Yeah. So honestly, this is my first speaking event. I'm just excited really to be involved, honestly. And I'm also excited to get out. I've got a bunch of kids that makes it hard to get out to these events, but I think now more than ever, it's really important just to go and be with the community and relate to each other and swap stories and all those things that sort of reinvigorate us in a way that where isolation does not, afford. And in terms of what I'll be talking about, I'm just going to keep it real, exactly like my bio. You can expect my bio, but just keeping it real the whole time. Very vulnerable. I think that's my strong suit rather than technical and whatever. So that's what I'm bringing. If that sounds exciting, awesome. I'm really excited to see everybody there and hang
Oh,
out.
man, well, we're so excited to have you. It's going to be such a great talk. It's been great getting to know you over the last 10 years, Reese, and just seeing how talented you are and how you've gotten more talented. I still feel like the best Reese is yet to come. So I can't see what you're going to do over the next
We'll see.
decade. For everyone listening on this, tickets are on sale right now. You can check it out at dashbash.net, and you can join us June 11th through 13th this summer, 2025, in Raleigh, North Carolina, for the Dash Bash, an animation and motion design festival built around creativity, inclusivity, and getting to know all the cool people in our space. Thanks for your time, Reese. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back with our continued speaker series, so make sure to check them all out. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks, guys.